There is a room full of people right now, all wanting the same thing, the same freedom, the same life, the same wealth, but by the end of this year only a tiny fraction of them will actually have it. Not because they weren't smart enough, not because they didn't have the right ideas, but because of one psychological difference that almost nobody talks about: the gap between dreaming and executing. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will permanently change the way you see yourself and your relationship with success. Here's a psychological truth that most people never confront. Dreaming feels good. Not just emotionally, but chemically. When you imagine your future success, your dream home, your financial freedom, the version of you that made it, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical released when you actually achieve something. In other words, your brain cannot always tell the difference between imagining success and having it. And this is the trap. This is why millions of people spend years planning, visualizing, journaling, and talking about their goals and never move a single inch forward. The dream itself becomes the reward. Think about Marcus. Marcus was 29 years old. He had a notebook filled with business ideas, 17 of them. He had spreadsheets, color-coded plans, motivational quotes on his wall. He talked about his goals at every dinner table. His family believed in him. His friends admired his vision. But 5 years passed, and not one of those 17 ideas had been started. Not one. When someone finally asked him why, Marcus said something deeply revealing. He said, "I'm still getting ready." That phrase, "getting ready," is the most expensive sentence in the human language. Because here's what psychology tells us: the longer you stay in the planning phase, the more your brain mistakes the plan for the result. You feel like you're working, but you're actually just dreaming in an organized way. The comfort of the dream becomes a substitute for the courage of execution. Now let's talk about the other side. What separates the person who executes from the person who only dreams? It's not confidence, it's not talent, it's not even motivation. It is something far more unglamorous. It is called tolerance for discomfort. High execution people have trained themselves, consciously or not, to act before they feel ready. They've accepted a fundamental psychological truth. Clarity does not come before action. Clarity comes from action. Most people are waiting to feel certain before they begin. But certainty is not a starting point. It is a destination. You do not find it in your head. You find it in the process. Let me tell you about a woman named Diane. Diane was a single mother living in a small apartment in Ohio. She had an idea for an online tutoring business. But she didn't have a logo. She didn't have a website. She didn't have a business plan. She didn't feel ready. One Tuesday evening, she simply posted a message in a local community group. "I tutor kids in math and science, $20 an hour, message me." That was it. No branding, no strategy, no perfect moment. By the end of that week, she had 3 clients. By the end of that month, 12. Within 18 months, she had hired 2 other tutors and turned that single post into a real business. Diane didn't wait for perfect conditions. She created movement, and the momentum followed. Here is the psychological principle behind her story. Execution does not require perfection. It requires a single act of forward motion. The brain, once it experiences the result of action, even a small result, recalibrates. It begins to associate doing with reward, rather than thinking with reward. That is the rewiring moment. That is where the rich mindset is born. Now let's talk about someone you may already know: Howard Schultz. The man who built Starbucks into a global empire did not come from money. He grew up in a housing project in Brooklyn, New York. His father worked labor jobs and had no health insurance. As a child, Schultz watched his father break his ankle at work and lose everything because of it. That moment didn't just scar him. It shaped him. Schultz went on to take over a small Seattle coffee company and pitched the idea of expanding it into a European-style espresso cafe culture. The original owners said no. So what did he do? He didn't sit down. He didn't go back to dreaming. He raised money from 242 investors. 217 of them said no. 217 rejections. But Schultz had developed what psychologists call an execution identity. This is a concept worth understanding deeply. An execution identity means that a person no longer sees action as something they choose to do when motivated. They see it as simply who they are. Schultz didn't say, "I'll try again when I feel better." He said, in every fiber of his psychology, "This is what I do. I move forward." And the world we live in today, where Starbucks exists on nearly every corner of every major city, is the physical result of that mindset. Now here is the deeper psychological truth inside this story. Every single person who said no to Schultz probably had dreams of their own. They had ideas, visions, ambitions, but they had also built a habit, perhaps without even knowing it, of stopping when the road got uncomfortable. Schultz built the opposite habit, and that not intelligence, not privilege, not luck is what made the difference. The habit of execution is the most powerful wealth habit a human being can build. I want to tell you something now that most motivational content will never say out loud. Your dream is not your problem. You have a beautiful dream, maybe you've had it for years, and it is real, it is valid. But here is the brutal psychological truth. The dream, without execution, slowly becomes a prison. Every year that passes, every year you stay in the planning phase, every year you say not yet or I'm still preparing, the dream doesn't stay the same size. It shrinks, and something far more dangerous grows in its place. Doubt. The internal voice that begins to whisper, maybe this isn't meant for you. Maybe you're not the type of person this happens to. That voice is not wisdom. That voice is the psychological consequence of inaction. Research in behavioral psychology shows that self-belief is not something people are born with. It is built through repeated acts of follow-through. Every time you do what you said you would do, even something small, your brain registers a signal. I am someone who executes. And every time you don't, it registers the opposite. Over time, one of these two identities becomes the story you tell yourself. The dreamer who never moved, or the person who decided on an ordinary day, with no perfect conditions, to simply begin. There will always be people who plan. There will always be people who say one day, but somewhere in this world right now there is someone with less talent than you, fewer resources than you, more obstacles than you, who is simply moving. Not perfectly, not confidently, not with a 10-step strategy, just moving. And 5 years from now, when you look back at this moment, this exact moment, you will not regret the things you tried and failed at. You will only regret the dreams you protected by never testing them. So here is the only question that matters today. Not what is my plan, not am I ready, but simply what is the one thing I can do today that my future self will thank me for? Just one thing. Not a revolution, not a transformation overnight. One act of execution. One moment where you choose movement over comfort. Because the gap between where you are and where you want to be is not filled with better ideas. It is filled with days like today. And today is still here.